All right, now, excuse me. Last week when we got together, we were dealing with James chapter 5, the first part of James chapter 5, and we got through a good chunk of that, but I did want to make a couple of additional comments about that, just to kind of button that section up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reread just a small portion of that for you now. This is in James chapter 5, verses 4 through 6 is what I want to deal with for just a couple of minutes. So here is what it says. Behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields, the your is these rich people who need to weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon them, and which has been withheld by you, cries out against you. And the outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of Yehovah Zevaot. You have lived luxuriously on the earth and have led a life of wanton pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He does not resist you. So we spoke last week about this whole issue of who these rich people are and what is their great offense. Does anyone remember or could characterize in just a short word or phrase, what is the offense of these people? Is the offense just being rich, just having too much money? Bob?
I'm sorry. I'm switching from my headphones off.
Oh, you were not wanting to. Yeah, I thought you looked like you were raising your hand. I apologize.
Hey, Alan.
Yes.
Keith here. I got something to add. Because the way this reads, too, it sounds like these are like the movers and the shakers, the guys that have the big fields and the agricultural giants that weren't paying their laborers.
Right.
And those type, because everything, there was no industry, it was pretty much agricultural. So it sounds like those players were the ones that weren't treating their workers right.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we talked about not the fact that they had money that was the issue, but that they were, probably trusting in something other than our Father for their needs. They had begun to trust. We also noted that they had moth and rust building up on their clothing, and so what that was indicative of was hoarding. They were hoarding. They were storing up their treasures in the last days. They were using their power, their wealth, and their influence in an unrighteous fashion to basically trample on the rights and the needs and the concerns of those who were below them in the societal structure. We noted that it is not likely that James was speaking to the wealthy members of his readership. Remember that his readership is the 12 tribes of Israel scattered abroad in the diaspora. And we know it's right in verse 1 of chapter 1. But it's not likely that there were that many wealthy people in the congregation. We also determined that it was not likely that he was going to be speaking to the wealthy of the world just in general, because they're not likely to be reading this book. What we determined and was most likely is that he was making a prophetic utterance, like many prophets will, against the evildoers. Not because they're going to be reading this and take any correction from it, but most likely because of verse 7, which we're going to get to in a few minutes, which is, be patient, brethren. He's talking about judgment coming upon the evil, greedy, and powerful of this earth, because he wants to let his readers know, who are probably poor and downtrodden, that he recognizes what's happening to them, and our Heavenly Father certainly does as well. So he's basically offering encouragement by pronouncing a prophetic judgment against the unrighteous wealthy of the planet. Not ever expecting that the unrighteous wealthy are going to read this book or take any instruction from it. Doesn't mean that they couldn't. Certainly hope that they would. So there you have, in a nutshell, the initial few verses and what's going on here. What I wanted to do is kind of bring you back to the passage from the Torah, which is the foundation of these things. It always is a great idea to bring ourselves back to Father's words in the beginning. So here I want to share with you Leviticus 19:13. So, and this is just a short passage. You can read all of Leviticus chapter 19, and I highly recommend that you do because it has very much to do with how we treat each other. And this particular portion says in 19:13, "You shall not oppress your neighbor nor rob him. The wages of a hired man are not to remain with you all night until morning." Now, this is and then of course later on in chapter 19 of Leviticus, you can see him telling people who were field owners, I'm sorry I didn't put that up there, but what's coming next? It's don't reap out to the very edges of your field. You leave that for the poor and the widow and the sojourner. And if you go over your grape or you go over your olive grove one time to get the bulk of the stuff, don't go over it again and pluck every last olive off of there and put it in your basket. Leave something for somebody behind you. That's the basis of this generosity and this service to others. Now the question becomes, how do we apply this if we do have, because we don't, not many of us are landowners these days. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you're all aware, the American farmer, frankly, any farmer of the earth is a dying breed, right? There aren't very many small family farms or even big family farms. It's all industrialized farming now, where the people, the Bill Gateses of the world and the Black Rocks and all these mega conglomerates are buying up millions of, the Chinese government buying up millions of acres all over the planet and trying to control the food supply. This is just the way it's happening. So not many of us in this congregation, not many of us around the world are farm workers or farm field owners. So how do we take these instructions about not reaping to the edges and making sure that we pay our workers at the end of the day? I mean, this is specifically talking about day laborers. I don't suggest that if you are an employer that you need to pay your employees at the end of each day. That'd be a bit of an administrative nightmare. But the issue here is, how do we apply this stuff to modern life? Or do we at all? Is there any applicable thing that we can glean from this, Jerry or Gracie?
Well, the gleaming part on the fields, I would say that the welfare program, like food stamps, WIC or whatever it is that babies under 5 or 6 years old get, and there's hundreds of other things in the food and the welfare program. To me, that takes the place of reaping fields and doing stuff like that. It's a welfare program.
Yeah.
But I think back in their time, it was so that those people had a lot of pride, and if they had to take welfare like we do today, they would be ashamed to do it. So God allowed them to go out there and actually do the work themselves to make them feel better about themselves.
Right.
We don't have that today, but
Yeah.
it would
Good
be
insight.
nice if we did.
Good insight. Gracie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, only that I think that the whole point of, to me, the major point is that if they were in a situation, or if today there's somebody in a situation where they can have a little leeway in how long they hang on to the money that they're getting for from the work of their laborers, so that they would make a little interest or something before you would pay the laborers.
Sure.
That isn't right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
What the heck's you?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think, Bob, I do see an affirmative hand up now. Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, I recently, my wife and I recently finished all of Leviticus, and something in the back of my mind tells me along that line with not taking all of your crop out for the widows and the poor, stuff like that. But I think it also mentions the wild beasts and
Yeah.
being able to provide back to them as well.
Yeah.
And I grew up on cotton farms and stuff like that in Arizona, and I'm completely surrounded up here in Wisconsin with a lot of farming. And I read an interesting article several years ago that we have become so efficient with our farming it's actually hurting the wildlife because there's nothing left for them after the harvest.
Yeah, that does not surprise me. That is a good insight, Bob. I hadn't even considered that. You're absolutely right. There are passages in Leviticus that talk about those leftovers and gleanings are for the animals in the field too. There's probably a spiritual insight there as well. Did somebody else want to comment? Yes.
Sure. Okay, so you're not supposed to oppress your neighbor nor rob him. So in the case of withholding the wages, you're not intending to oppress or rob, but you are stealing the peace of mind of the man, because he may worry that you may not pay him, or something will happen to you, the owner of the field, and he won't get his wages.
Right.
So it's important to keep that, to honor the peace of mind of the worker.
Yeah.
It's also in a general sense about materialism, as Jesus tells us not to lay up your riches.
Right.
You know, go for the riches of heaven, not for the riches on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Good insight. You know, I actually had. Yeah, give it up, Lou.
Well, I know that my family and I and my lovely wife have been blessed, and I think it's part of this is sharing our blessings with others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important when we see somebody in need, which it says in the Bible, that we help them because we're blessed with things and they're struggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it would be just, if I just threw a little money out on of whatever, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Sorry, folks. I just trying to help out Nathan Briscoe. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Good insight. Sorry about that. So I was going to say two things here. When we think about the quintessential story of the Bible about the poor gleaning from the field, who do we think of? Ruth and Naomi. Absolutely. Now, what do those two ladies have in common? What's that, Grace? They're both widows. That's correct. Okay. Now, that's point number one, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Point number two is I actually had an opportunity to have something like this, to deal with something like this, the hired man waiting for his wages. I am a contractor who hires subcontractors sometime. And of course, it's common for some people to say, well, I'm hired by the client to do the big job, and then I hire a bunch of people underneath me and to do their smaller jobs. And when I get paid from the client, you'll get paid. That is not righteousness. You know what I'm saying? If they've done their part of the work and they send me an invoice, I can't say, I'm going to hold on to your invoice until the client pays me. And I've had that happen a few times. And these are fellow Christians, because I do business with a lot of Christians. And I had one of them who I was a subcontractor working for him. And he was like, oh, I'll pay you when I get paid from the contractor. I said, no, you won't. I've completed my work. You'll pay me now. I do the same for you. When you finish your portion of the work, I send you an invoice. You pay me now. You send me your invoice. I pay you now. When you're done with your work, you get paid, period. I'm going to hold those costs until the big client pays me. That's my responsibility as a business owner. I have to carry that risk and that responsibility. And I pointed to this passage to my Christian brother, and he said, "But it never even occurred to me." But I said, "That's biblical, buddy. You pay your workers when their work is done. If they've done a week's worth of work for you, or if they completed a one-off job for you, pay them when the work is done." It's an important thing to do, because you count on that money. When you're done, you want to get paid. So the next point here is The Father's purpose, clearly from Leviticus 19, is that we would love and serve faithfully each other. That's his primary purpose. I've said to you 100 times, and I'll say it 100 more times, just in case you were wondering. Our Father in heaven does not need anything from you. Nothing. He even says so, periodically. I got cattle on 1,000 hills. I don't need your sacrifices. What he does want is for you to serve and love each other. So, we will be rewarded in this life and in the next based upon our service that we render to others and the way we treat others. James has got a big thing that he keeps pushing in this book about how we're seeing others, especially in regard to social class, and how we treat others. And I think you want to remember that you will be rewarded in exact proportion to the service that you render to others. That is a quote from Nightingale, Earl Nightingale, this guy from the Depression era. It's a distillation of biblical passages, but I think it's very poignant and that you should remember it. You will be rewarded both in this life and in the next in exact proportion to the service that you render to others. Pretty powerful stuff. Remember, though, and this is also critical, that we are talking specifically, Father is specifically talking here about widows, orphans, sojourners, and animals. These are not lazy people. These are not people who, now Jerry mentioned something about the welfare system that we have in America. You know, of course, if you're a student of history of any kind, we didn't used to have a welfare system in America. Whose job was that? It was the church. And the family first, and then the church second. Why do you think the government stood up to fill that gap? There's only one answer. Huh? Well, the church fell down on the job. Of course there's money and power and purse strings. Of course the government wants access to the purse strings and the power. But what you really have to recognize is, do you think the people would have voted to give that kind of power and money to the government if they were handling their own affairs, taking care of each other through their families and through their churches, if it had been working? And some politician had said, hey man, if you'll give us a bunch of money, we'll take care of the poor. Anybody in their right mind would have said, well, are you crazy? We don't need you to do that. We're taking care of our own. And our churches are taking care of our own. Give that to Lou. So no, that is neither biblical nor is it good. You know the statistics about how much of that money actually goes to the poor. For every dollar that is given to the federal government that's going to be given to a poor person, how much gets there? 10 cents? 10%? Yeah, 10%. The administrative state sucks up the other 90%. That is a horrible, horrible welfare system. But people rely on it because the church, the assembly of God, fell flat on their faces. Lou?
Well, this is maybe kind of funny, but there's never mentioned in here about the widower. The
widower. Why do you think that is?
That's what I mean, I've been one. It's, I needed help. And I know others that needed help.
Well, yes. Now, here's the question, Lou. You are a widower. Your wife died.
Right.
Did you need financial help?
You know what? Yes.
Okay.
Because,
and you know what? And who stood up to help you?
Not very many.
Okay.
Yeah. But the reason, this is just something today, it wasn't big financial help, but there was a loss.
Yeah.
Because I lost her Social Security.
Sure.
Lost her pension.
Sure. So
there was a loss.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
And so it's just I don't know that.
Well, no, that's a great question, and I think that historically and culturally the answer would be that a man is expected to take care of himself, and a woman is a creature who is more vulnerable, and theoretically, in cultures past has needed a man to support her and help her. That is not the case anymore, or at
Well,
least that's what they say. I don't know if that's true.
In this day and time, it is different.
Yeah,
It is different.
it is.
Yeah,
is.
because sometimes well, I'll just talk right.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to let Bob talk, and then I'm going to give it to Gracie. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, if you look back historically at the Hebrew culture at that time, the men didn't have the same type of obligations that women did, and when their wife died, they always had the ability to turn around and remarry. And part of that marriage was the dowry that came from that family back to that new husband.
Right.
So eventually that husband would land back on their feet, and there wasn't this big need for the men of the time to have a welfare system.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good insight. Gracie, and then Angela.
I'm just wondering if, I guess that if a younger person, then like with Lou, it didn't have any kids in the home when his wife died, right?
No.
So he wouldn't have any problem with that. But a younger person, for instance, with me, when we were married, he was in the military, and if he died, I would have been strapped.
Right.
But then again, we had welfare in our cities and stuff,
Right.
for that.
Yeah.
And I would have been helped from the military
Right.
benefits. So
Which is absolutely
You know.
right. That's absolutely right. If you got a member of the military serving, the government should absolutely step up to take care of that widow. Yeah, absolutely. Angela?
Lou asked why not the widower? Why isn't the widower mentioned? It's always about the widow. And I don't mean to take this into woo-woo land.
Into what?
Woo-woo land.
Woo-woo
I always
land.
spiritualize it. We've had a lot of good conversation about literally for people who have lost a spouse. Okay, but I think maybe something to consider is that the reason why it doesn't address the widower is because I think a lot of times when it's speaking of the widow, and a lot of the things we've discussed on a practical level, the widow is Israel, whose husband died. And I think a lot of the times when we're reading about these widow situations, it's a picture of Israel being widowed by the husband. And this is all going back to the early and latter reigns in verse 7 right here, which you were talking about. And you brought up Ruth and Naomi, who were both widows. Naomi was a widow who had left the land, think exile, and come back. And Ruth had another component where she is a grafted in Gentile, so to speak. And so both of these women are pictures of Israel gleaning from the corners of the field. And so when they're talking about these early and latter rains, I think this is about a harvest, and it has to do with Israel. And that's why we think back to those two widows.
Yeah.
But then make that connection that we're also talking about Israel, which is the body,
Right.
who has been widowed by her husband. I always think when it says early and latter rains, I always think first and second coming.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about the early and latter rains in a moment, but yeah, that's a good insight. That's a very good insight. I want to bring to your attention just a couple of real quick passages that have to do, and these are passages that are not talked about a lot these days. They're very uncomfortable to take a look at. But the first one is in 1 Timothy 5 and 8. It says, if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. This is talking specifically about a man who will not provide, for whatever reason, for his own household. And there's a similar passage to it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 7, where Paul has to deal with this in the Thessalonian church, where he says, you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example, because we did not act in an undisciplined manner among you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But with labor and hardship we kept working night and day, so that we would not be a burden to any of you. Not because we do not have the right, to you supporting us as ministers, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you that you might follow our example. For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order: if anyone will not work, neither let him eat. For we hear that some among you are leading an undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies. Now, such persons we command and exhort in the Master Yeshua Messiah to work in quiet fashion and eat their own bread, so that you can have something to share with someone else. Jerry, you want to make a comment? And then Nathan, you're up next, buddy. Hold on just a second. Go ahead, Jerry.
I was just going to say that first verse that you read.
Yes.
We had an insurance salesman that would, every house he'd go to, that's the verse that he would use to try to get somebody to buy insurance, because it's his responsibility to provide for his family after he's gone. Now, I don't know if that's biblical or not.
Life insurance, that's a great point. I don't know if there's any, insurance salesmen in the house, but I would say it's a great idea to provide for your family. If you don't have enough money saved to take care of your family in case you die, yes, you should do something. Now, here's an idea, and I've spoken about this before, that I want to throw out to you just for your consideration. To me, it is shameful that sons and daughters would not take care of their parents. Absolute shameful. I'm sorry. If you don't like it, send me a letter. I'll put it in the round file. I don't care. Seriously. Man, it's just shameful to me that children would not support their parents. They took care of you for God knows how long. At least until you were probably 18. If they were decent parents at all, they probably didn't throw you out on your ear right when you were 18 years old. Some of the kids today are living with their parents until they're in their 20s. Now, if you can take care of them for the first 18 to 20 to 25 to even 30 years of their life, they can sure as heck do the same for you. Am I preaching to somebody?
Alan, so all those diapers you changed, you're going to get your diapers changed.
Yes, Keith. Absolutely. Go ahead. Oh, wait. No, you're not up. You got to wait. Nathan Briscoe, tell it like it is, brother.
I'll agree that it is a big shame. It's not only a shame, it's also against the Big Ten. Honor your father and your mother. People used to think that means like courtesy when your parents come in the room.
Yes.
Jesus said that he gave some color to this when he said that you say, the money that I would give to my parents is, I've given it to God, right? So he shows us that honor your father and mother, is not a commandment to children. It's a commandment to adults. It is referring to, taking care of your parents. But I was just going to say that these verses from Paul, they're examples of kind of a refutation of this concept in the New Testament that we're not under, the law anymore.
Right.
These are kind of like they're kind of new laws that Paul is sharing with his congregation. He's saying, guys, you need to provide for yourself and for your household. That can probably be linked to something in the Torah. But this is just one of these examples. Like, look, this is a rule. If you're going to say you're a new covenant believer and you don't need to follow the Old Testament, well, what about this one? Here's the long New Testament.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful, beautiful insight. And you're absolutely right talking about Yeshua saying, you have a fine way of setting aside the commandment of God to follow your tradition, because you say you don't have to take care of your parents. The way out of that is to just say, I'm giving that money to God. Nonsense. Go ahead, Jerry. Or go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make a little comment about life insurance salesmen. But it's positive.
Is there any spiritual insight into this comment?
Yes, there is.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I used to do it.
You used to be a life insurance salesman?
Yes.
Oh, good.
And I actually delivered a $100,000 life insurance claim back to a young, 40 or 50, and he had 6 or 7 kids.
Nice.
And he was so, he hugged me and everything. Yeah.
That's important stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
It is. When you look at it, it is important stuff,
Right.
because he needed that money
Yeah.
to raise those kids.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what we need to remember as Christians, looking back into our Torah, looking back at the first, 5 books of the Bible and saying, there's a lot of stuff there that we just let fall by the wayside. And it has seriously affected us, our families, our culture, our cities, our states, our country, the world. It's all completely upside down. We got a different way of doing things that does not follow God's plan. And look how it's turning out. It's horrific. It's horrific and none of it works. Who is it? It's David Branton. You go, buddy.
Yeah, I was, the other verse that you read, I had come out and missed that one. And, what was odd was, my dad was born in 1921. He passed away when I was pretty young, but one of the things that he always taught me in these short phrases. And one of those phrases was, around here, if you don't work, you don't eat.
Absolutely.
So I heard that come into my head when you read that.
Yep, absolutely, man.
It's not really the same anymore, I think, but it was in those days.
That's right. That's an excellent quote. That's an excellent quote. When it says here in this passage here that we were reading from James, where it says, "Behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your field and which has been withheld by you cries out against you." That ought to, if you've got your ears perked up a little bit, does anybody know, what does that sound like? Where have we heard something like this before? Jerry?
When the children of Israel cried out to God in the wilderness, God had to respond.
Okay.
That's just a
Okay.
God law.
No, that is a good insight. I'm thinking specifically about the idea of some inanimate object or something calling out. What is it, Hayden?
Abel. Yeah, Abel's blood.
The blood of Abel. Yes. Yes, that's what that made me think
There's some
of when
lack
I
of
read,
justice.
because of a lack of justice. I think these passages are definitely connected, that you've got an inanimate, the pay of the laborers is crying out against you, and the blood of your brother is crying out against you because of your unrighteousness. I actually put that passage up here. I'd like to read it for you. It says, "Then Yah said to Cain," this is from Genesis 4 and 6. It says, "Then Yah said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it." And Cain told Abel his brother. I've always wondered, what did Cain tell his brother Abel? And it came about when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And then Yah said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" And he said, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And he said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." Strikingly similar passage and strikingly similar situations where someone with power has risen up over someone else and begun to mistreat them in a very poor fashion. In fact, the passage from James goes on to say some things about, you have killed and mistreated the righteous man. He doesn't resist you. It lends even more credence to this comparison. So what's interesting to me, and you can see even more parallels, is Cain was marked. Are these people marked in the book of James here? Did you see any language in that passage from James which seems to suggest that they are marked? Indeed. You hear that you have heaped up and lived luxuriously on the life. You have fattened yourselves in a day of slaughter. That literally means they have absorbed so much for their physical appetites that they're getting fat and bloated like an animal that is getting ready to be slaughtered. They are bringing great judgment on themselves by their wicked behavior. Now, why is this important? This is important because he's trying to encourage the downtrodden, which is what you need, which is what everybody on this planet needs right now as we're looking at being, the thumb of the powerful, the thumb of the, whatever it is, if you've got a tyrannical government or if you've got, the heavies of whatever kind putting their thumb on you and you're being mistreated and your livelihood, your welfare, your money, your whatever is being slowly leached out of you, you are crying out to Adonai Zavaot, the Lord of armies, and you're saying, I need rescuing. I need rescuing. Nobody can save me from these people. You know how many Psalms are in the Bible where David says, my enemies were too powerful for me. They're too powerful. I couldn't do anything. I just had to give it over to the Father. And I hope that's what you're doing. I hope that's what you're doing, that you're calling out to the Father, whose job it is to rescue you. He's telling you, look, man, the judge who's going to judge the earth, he's right at the door. He's right at the door. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the wicked are marked for judgment and recompense, and they are heaping it upon themselves without even realizing it. Their moth and rust and wealth is the judgment against them, just like the blood was from the ground. Angela?
I'm thinking about something David said last week about always holding up a mirror to yourself when you're reading.
David, the king of Israel, or David Branton?
David online.
Yeah, go ahead.
But when we talk about this and the rich and the poor and the ones who are oppressed and the ones who are being oppressed, we always put ourselves in the camp of the oppressed and the poor and the ones that are suffering at the hands of these evil people.
Okay, don't go too far down that road because that's my next point. But if you want to preempt me, you have my blessing.
The servant.
Huh?
The parable with the servant.
No, if you want to bring that up, you go right ahead.
You said that they're putting their thumb on us, but I think that you have to always remember, if you get all self-righteous and you forget to consider, are you being a little thumb as well? Like the servant whose debt was forgiven, but then he went to the other guy who owed him a little bit and put his thumb on him. And at the same time that we want the encouragement while we feel like we're being oppressed, we also want to make sure that we are not. That, when Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? What I find so ironic about that is that's exactly what God wanted him to be. And he's saying it in some facetious way, like, what, am I supposed to look out for him? And God is saying exactly.
Yes. Absolutely.
Precisely.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome, awesome insight, Angela. Anybody have any comments, questions, or concern about that? I think that was a good discussion there. David, go ahead.
That passage, am I my brother's keeper? It's one of the most misused phrases in common use today when people are trying to recuse themselves. People say that phrase, and I'm like, oh, please don't say that.
Yeah.
That's what Cain said after he killed his brother.
Yeah.
Okay? You got it all wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, that is the Father's greatest desire, is that we would be our brother's keeper and have a heart to do so. Man, that is so critical. And I think Angela began to say, before I preempted her with a karate move, that our immediate impulse is to think, that's not me. I would ask you to consider this. Now, don't read too far into this. I'm not heaping a bunch of condemnation on you, but I do want to bring to your attention a couple of things. Could it actually be you? Just something to consider. Could it be you? Are you wealthy? Are you misusing, hoarding, trusting in your wealth instead of in your Father in heaven? Could it actually be us? Consider that Romanized, I use that word as you would use the term Western. I will call it Rome. Rome would include the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, England, Germany, all of Western Europe. These are the wealthy places, right? Where we have tremendous amount of wealth. We also have a tremendous amount of what you would call social security, where even our poor people, I think somebody mentioned last week, even our poor people are driving pretty nice cars and have television sets and phones and, they ain't really hurting that bad. Does their life suck considerably more than yours? Undoubtedly. But they're doing okay. It's not that they ain't eating, okay? They got a rough life, but they got their needs taken care of. So we are Romans, and we have tremendous wealth comparatively. Do you know what percentage of the Earth's population these Western nations make up? Any ideas? It's about... What's that? Who said that? Nathan said it before he bounced. Anyway, no, I think consider where the population centers of the world are. China and India have, how many people are on this planet right now? Close to 8 billion. Okay? How many people are in India? About almost 2 billion. How many people are in China? At least 1 billion or almost approaching 2 billion. So how many people, that doesn't even consider Africa, Southeast Asia. So what percentage of the world is really wealthy and really powerful? It's a small percentage. You might be approaching 20%, maybe. You see what I'm saying? You might have 1 billion people on this planet who are really wealthy and powerful, comparatively, to the other 6 or 7 billion who are living in dirt, poverty, squalor. Now, when I say the rich, do you think that might be you? Now, I'm not suggesting that you are mistreating others and stuff like that. But could you be, my primary consideration here, my primary concern here is, what are you trusting in? Because I'll tell you that Western Christians are trusting in a whole lot of other things than their God. They're trusting in their governments. They're trusting in their bank accounts. They're trusting in Social Security. They're trusting in Medicaid. They're trusting in the Republican Party. They're trusting in the Democrat Party. They're trusting in science and medicine. Now, what do you think God is going to do to those idols? He's going to destroy them. You've already seen it happen. How's your faith in science these days? Has it been shaken? Yeah. How's your faith in government these days? Has it been shaken? How's your faith in the monetary system, the economy? Has it been shaken? Do you see what God is doing? He's shaking the idols of this earth that you and me and everyone has been trusting in. Let that sink in for a minute. We, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, are a bunch of idolaters. And he is destroying our idols. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. I'm sorry, I got a little heavy there.
No, but do you see how nice that is?
What'd you say?
I said, do you see how nice that is for him to give us a chance to realize that those even were idols?
Okay, Angela was speaking, but you couldn't hear her because Hayden drove the bus off the cliff. Sorry, Hayden's in charge of the microphone.
I said you can see his loving kindness even in that, because he's giving us a chance to realize that those are idols, which I don't think many of us did until we realized they couldn't smell,
Save us.
taste, those things he says about idols. So yeah, so we're given a chance to realize what the idols are and then to shift. And I think that that's actually, it's like due process, like justice done with judiciously, or justice you
Justice
shall
with
first.
justice. Yes, I agree. I think you're absolutely right that Father is being very gracious to us to give us an opportunity to repent and to begin to trust in Him, because that was just a taste. What you've experienced over the last 2 years, that was a taste of what is coming. And He's warning you, don't place your trust in these systems or these peoples. Don't do it, because He's just letting you know He's foreshadowing. He's doing a little foreshadowing. I'm going to destroy these things. And if you're trusting in them rather than me, you're going to be in real trouble. You're going to be really hurting. You're going to be really afraid. Your fear and your panic and your anxiety is going to overwhelm you. Don't let it happen. Don't let it happen to you. Encourage one another while it is still called today, right? Now, next issue. Does anybody want to well, I guess let me just point this out. What should we do? What should we actually do? Weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon us. That's what James says. Yes. And I think what this means is we need to be repentant. I think we can get a little smug and say, oh gosh, yeah, you're right. I had never considered that. But what should you do? Repent. Don't do it anymore. Don't trust in those things. And I'm not suggesting you should weep and howl, but you should absolutely repent and turn to the Father with all of your heart and throw those things aside. Don't hear me telling you that you shouldn't vote. Don't hear me telling you that you shouldn't go to the doctor. Don't hear me telling you you should stop, saving for the future. This is about trust. This is about idolatry. It's not about wisdom. There is some wisdom in, you should vote. To the effect that you have the ability to influence in a positive way the government around you, you should absolutely do so. If you should be sick, you should go to the doctor. Who knows but that the Father might give that doctor wisdom and discernment and the ability to heal you, in spite of his own ineptitude. We got to be wise about these things. Just don't trust in them. Don't put your hope in them. Put your hope in your Father in heaven and let the chips fall where they may. Period. Okay? Whoo! I was preaching it up. I got one other passage I want to share with you, which is right up this same alley, and it is from Luke 21:34. It says, "Be on guard that your hearts may not be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day where the Master is standing at the door and He's coming to judge the earth come upon you suddenly like a trap, or like a thief in the night, as Paul would say. For it will come upon all those who dwell upon the face of the earth. But keep on the alert at all times, praying in order that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that are about to take place and to stand before the Son of Man." That is from Luke 21:34. Some of your translations may say that you may have the strength to escape all these things. I think that's a horrible translation. You are not going to have the strength to escape these things. Counted worthy to escape is a whole different thing. And this is not talking about escaping the wrath of God. This is talking about escaping tribulation. Bless you. So I would just say to you, repent and place your trust in Father. And also, you know what? It's okay to ask. Could you think that I could perhaps be considered worthy to escape some of this nightmarish scenarios that are about to come on the earth? I'm not really feeling worthy to escape these things, but the fact is, somebody has to. Could it be me? Would you include me in that group? I'd love to escape all these things that are about to come on the earth. I know I'm not worthy of it, but would you consider it? That'd be so neat. Gracie, you want to say something?
just on my own personal feelings on it.
Yes.
This has been going on for a long time now, it seems
Sure.
like.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've just basically gone on my face before the Lord saying, if I can't be used the way you want me used, take me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be a detriment to the other people around me either.
Sure.
But I want to go too.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think now I'm going to put this other passage up on the screen. It says James 5:7, which I think all the stuff that we have discussed up until this point has been to bring us to this point where it says, be patient, therefore, brethren, until the coming of the master. Behold, the farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets the early and the latter rains. You too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the master is at hand. These are really powerful words. And the whole tone of the book changes right here. Right here, there's a strong pivot point where he's done railing against the wealthy and the powerful, and he turns to the suffering and the downtrodden, and he says, be patient. Be patient. Now, there's a lot that needs to be said right here. Unfortunately, I don't have time to say it to you, but I'm going to next time. We're going to spend some time next time talking about, and I would encourage you to look into a couple of things. What is patience? How do we grow patience? How do we learn it? What metaphors and perhaps prophetic metaphors are used here? The precious produce of the soil, the early and the latter rains. The master is at hand. We've got some really powerful stuff to talk about here. And I want to just leave you with a quote that is a brief definition of patience. And I would ask you to consider this. Patience is enduring suffering, abuse, or persecution with courage and hope, but without complaining or seeking unwise and hasty fixes for the difficulties. I'm going to read that again. Patience is enduring suffering, abuse, or persecution with courage and hope, but without complaining or seeking unwise and hasty fixes for the difficulties. You know who wrote that? I did.
But
I just made that up.
maybe you should read that again, and we should think about Israel in the wilderness and some of the things that went down as they were going through that 40 years.
Yeah.
He didn't have courage or hope. And he certainly didn't.
Quick fixes, complaining, enduring difficulties.
Yeah.
This is our wilderness.
This is our wilderness, absolutely. And I think we really need to learn about patience. And you know the old Christian trope, never pray for patience.
Heck no.
Why is that? Why do you think that is? Because the only way to learn patience is through suffering. So if you're praying for patience, you're asking God, heap some suffering on me. I'm ready to learn. It's probably one of the best prayers you could pray, but you wouldn't like it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it right there.